Jeanne Ives, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois Channel.
Thank you for having me on.
And we are going to, let me start off by just saying we're doing this on March 23rd. Obviously, we have so many people at home because of the stay-at-home order the governor issued that sometimes the strength of our internet connection isn't what we would wish it to be. So at the moment, you seem to be clear, but if we get you looking a little fuzzy, we hope the audience will accept our apologies for that. But first of all, congratulations on your winning the Republican nomination in the 6th District. You are now officially the candidate running against Congressman Sean Casten in the 6th District of Illinois.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for that. We worked very hard to make sure that we had a big victory, and the great thing about our campaign is that really the entire Republican Party united around our effort and knew that we were the organization that had the wherewithal, the right messaging, and really the work ethic to bring a victory home in November. And so we're feeling really good about our win, and we are looking forward to moving on from the primary and just working hard in the general to win this for the people of the 6th District.
When you won the nomination, most of that, of course, was done prior to this whole coronavirus thing coming out. What were the, it's almost like before Corona and after Corona, you know, BC.
It's true.
What were the issues then? And then we'll transition to how the world has changed.
Well, certainly the issues in the 6th Congressional District was the economy and keeping that economy strong. And why is that? Because the secondary issue is, of course, healthcare costs and accessibility. So, and those two go hand in hand. In the 6th Congressional District, where you have a lot of good businesses that provide employer-based health insurance coverage, people knew that if they had a strong economy, they were going to keep their job, they were going to be able to keep their health care, and they were going to be able to be successful in their own lives and raise their family here in a modest way. So that the economy is everything, honestly, in the 6th District. And of course, taxes. Taxes are always a factor. So that actually played in because a lot of people don't understand, look, your property taxes are something that's dealt with mainly at the local level, but the state can affect those as well. It's not something that really the federal government has anything to do with. However, the tax burden in this district is enormous. The property tax burden is enormous, and people know that they're getting scammed. They really do. And the last thing they want is higher taxes at any level of government. So taxes, by far, is an issue that resonates with voters in this district. And I think that actually, post-coronavirus coming out, and by the way, we were just on the cusp, that primary happened only because Governor Pritzker decided to shut down bars and restaurants, but not the primary election, which it seems like a little bit of a disconnect for him on a policy front. But regardless, the primary went through successfully. Now, post-primary, we are looking at really the economy being one of the biggest factors in the upcoming election. How do we deal with that? Is it going to be massively more taxes and more government intervention that doesn't make sense for this district? Or are we going to get out of this with not as big of a increase in our deficit, only something to tide people over really affected, and then get a V-shaped outcome on the economy where you've got rising economic activity coming out of this? We don't know. We actually don't know at this point. And anybody who tells you they do know, they don't know. Nobody knows.
Yeah, you know, this is such a strange, I want to get into some of the issues, but let me just, before we get into the coronavirus issues, how does one, now that you are in fact the nominee, how do you run a campaign at a period of time when everyone's ordered to be at home? And, you know, this just happened. Maybe you're still, I presume you're still trying to figure it out yourself. How do you spend your days these days as a candidate?
Well, we're spending our days doing a lot of communications, and that means communications to our volunteer force about what we expect in the future, the fact that our office is shut down right now, so anything from a volunteer standpoint would be something that they could do at home. There's not a lot of that actually available. We're not making calls into the district per se, because you know what, people are under stress right now, and this is no time to bring up the politics and start nitpicking things. However, we are still weighing in on issues, trust me. And so our comm staff is as busy as all get out. I mean, we are super busy on communications. We're in terms of raising money, you know what, we're just going back to our donors and finding out how they're doing. There's still some donations that we can grab from aligned PACs now that the primary is over that have money to contribute. And by the way, we're on par for this quarter being a record quarter for our campaign. A significant uptick in donations came in this quarter, and we appreciate that, but we're very sensitive to our donors and the stress that they're feeling in their own lives and in their own businesses. But you can still campaign. This week, guess what we're doing? We're doing a virtual meet and greet. So we've done a lot of these small meet and greets around the district where people invite you into your home. You get to know their friends, their neighbors, church members, other associates. Well, we're going to do a virtual meet and greet this week. That'll be a lot of fun. We're going to be doing starting up our podcast, which we want to get started earlier, but now's the time to start doing the podcast where we bring in experts and we discuss the topics that are important to people in the 6th district and then push that out. So we've got a lot going on the digital front. Obviously, it's not appropriate to not work right now, so we're not doing that. But campaign goes on, and now's the planning phase also for the general election.
Let's get into some of the issues that obviously I think people want to hear some. What are your thoughts on what's going on with this coronavirus? Give us your thoughts on how you think both the president and his team are doing, as well as the governor and what he's done here in Illinois.
Certainly, we have faced pandemics in the past. What's new about this is that you're facing it in a digital media environment where people are far more involved in the conversation because there's so much information being put out about this. So I think that we have concerns here. We don't want people to be easily contracting this virus and then having our healthcare system come to almost a capacity, hit their capacity and not be able to deal with folks that are seriously ill. I think that's the biggest thing that we're worried about. We're not so worried about, at least in my opinion, I'm not worried about getting it. I'm not worried about my family getting them. We don't meet that demographic where we're much older or we have underlying health conditions that would be a problem. So I am not personally worried. I maybe I should be, but I'm not. What I am worried about is that if somebody has it and they pass it along to somebody who may be vulnerable, and then that person has to go to the hospital and the hospitals are at capacity, I think that is a concern. I think that is probably the biggest concern. I think the fact that our healthcare system is one of the best in the world, and certainly in the suburbs of Chicago, my goodness, we have some of the best healthcare teaching hospitals available to us. So I think that as long as we don't hit capacity, Illinois should be able to weather the storm. So I guess it raises the question, to what degree do we disrupt our economy for something that is obviously not affecting everybody? And I think that is the bigger concern. And now that we have already disrupted our economy, which has happened, how do we get out of that mess? How do we help folks truly affected by this crisis? How do we help them weather the storm, either personally because they're an employee that may have lost their job, or a business that is on the brink of literally having to close their shop and not be able to open when this all comes around? I think that is the biggest question that we have to deal with.
Have you been? I should preface my next question by the U.S. Senate, as we tape this, just again failed to pass a bill or to even take up debate on the bill that would have provided about $1 trillion in aid to both workers and businesses. I'm not clear why this is, but the Democrats are opposed to passage and the Republicans were trying to get it. What have you been hearing much from your business community or from your friends in the business community, and to what extent do you hear how concerned are they as far as their ability to weather the storm, and what do they need? And while you're a fiscal conservative, if you were a member of Congress right now, how would you be voting on some of these aid packages?
Well, that's a very good question. Look, the first bill that passed, $8.3 billion in specific needs to the healthcare industry to get the supplies that they needed and ramp up their operations. I think that was probably unanimous as far as I know, and that's good. The next bill that was passed then just last Friday by the House, I mean, essentially that bill was another, billions of dollars as well. And there were quite a few Republicans who did not vote on it. And in some cases, I am privy to why they didn't vote on it. I got some information on that. And the bill came up with 26 minutes to vote on it, 26 minutes to look at, hundreds of billions of dollars in bailouts. And a number of people said no, because also there were mechanisms in that bill that were not going to get the aid where it needed to get it in a timely manner. There were issues in there where they are relying on the Social Security Administration to administer some of the direct aid and stuff, and that was actually not going to work as well. So there were technical difficulties with the bill, which is always what happens. And Illinoisans are used to this. I mean, how many times have we had to go back and correct legislation because technically it fell apart, or there were reasons that they couldn't do what they wanted to do? So I think a careful approach, and anything that we do on assistance, and I hate to call it a bailout. I hope that we don't get to the point where we're bailing out large corporations, on the backs of taxpayers. But anytime that we're talking about assistance, it needs to be temporary. Assistance in this nature needs to be temporary and targeted, and needs, in this case, be immediate enough so that we get the effect that we want, which is we don't want businesses to close that have been healthy in the past, and we want the employee have been affected by this virus shutdown. We want them paid so that they can continue to afford their family and as rent and utilities and mortgages and whatever else. So I mean, I think that's the case, and I think that this came up with a package. Is that the right number? I really don't know, because I am not privy to
about $1 trillion. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard $1 trillion. I've heard $1.6 trillion. I don't know where they are at now, but it seems to me that both sides were actually putting in some things that were maybe unnecessary, or they were not careful enough about ensuring that any loan guarantees had strings attached to it, because you're talking about taxpayer loan guarantees. On the other side, I think it's just horrific that Nancy Pelosi said, I'm going to write my own bill. And from what I've heard, that's in her own bill, it's a bunch of handouts to unions and to the renewable energy sector. And we don't need any of that. And then it was also some additional mandates on business that were permanent mandates, like for paid family leave, that has been tossed around but has never been agreed to by either side. So we need to not do that. None of that should happen. And so how I would vote on it, I can't tell you, because I don't have the bill in front of me.
Some economist, in fact, James Bullard, the president of the Federal Reserve in St. Louis, said, unemployment might, I want to underscore might, go as high as 20%. That would put it up in the Great Depression cycle, and here we just went from historically low unemployment. So this is the greatest swing from the highs of the best economy in my lifetime to what might quickly become the worst economy in my lifetime. No one knows what the future is, and tomorrow New York starts testing this malaria drug to see if that will help. I just say this in the context of everything we're saying right now. There's so much unknown about what might happen, and the problem is, as you just were talking about, that to the extent that we can keep businesses from going under and allow them to survive until such time as we can turn this around is obviously key. Do you think it's a danger for our political establishment, or even for you as a candidate, for anyone, the governor, the president? The governor has been somewhat critical of the president's actions. Are we best to keep this nonpartisan, and yet in the Senate we see there's partisan votes taking place? What are your thoughts as far as the role of partisan politics in this context?
Well, this is not a time for any partisan politics at all. And so for Governor Pritzker to go out there and, demand action from Trump, first of all, you know what? Has anybody heard from Governor Pritzker on the real numbers? He is saying we are out of PPE. We are out of things that the hospitals needs. I have not seen those numbers. I have not seen them. And by the way, this virus is like almost non-existent in central and in southern Illinois. I've talked to people down there. And so why are you, I think that the better approach here would have been to shut down things regionally where a hotspot were to form. I think a better approach would be to actually share with the people who are not stupid. By the way, we're not, we can understand numbers. Where are your needs and where are you getting them from internally from the state of Illinois? And have you asked people to turn in extra protection gear that they have to hospitals? Have you asked for that? Have you asked for people to actually not do anything unnecessary surgeries or elective surgeries rather? And so, I mean, I don't know that he's shared with us enough the reasons for him completely shutting down this economy. But I will tell you what, the business people I talk to say that the government already knows who's in trouble, who needs help. And one of the things they'd like to see from this governor is that, you know what, for our unemployment experience to be stopped at the February 1st date. So that, like, if I have to lay off employees, that I'm not going to have an enhanced unemployment rating, which is going to cause me a lot more money down the road. Like, why don't we do common sense stuff like that? Why haven't you said we're going to have a complete delay in property taxes that are sent in? Or we've already shifted, at least for the federal level, when you have to send in your income taxes. What other things can you do for these employees? And by the way, because they have to report this all the time. They absolutely know which employees are getting and businesses are getting hammered by this virus. The other side, you've seen, I'm sure there's plenty of other employees that are doing quite well with overtime and everything else. So this is on a case-by-case basis, and the governor's not treating it that way.
What do you think? How long can we go with this shutdown? Or, as some people have said, maybe what we ought to do, we see on those who die, there's a lot of younger people getting infected, but they don't die. The people who are dying, the great preponderance, are people north of 60 years old. Do you have any thoughts? And I know this is not the kind of thing you even began to run on, but as you look at it now, do you have any thoughts on, should we say maybe if you're 60 years old or older, stay at home, but let's let the other people go back to work? And it seems to me the real people who are, the businesses are really getting hurt in this economy are those in the hospitality business, the bars, the restaurants, the hotels and conference centers. I just don't know if, not just from your own thoughts, but if you've had any input from any people in those businesses as far as what they might be telling you as how they can survive.
Look, I mean, you risk kind of playing Monday morning quarterback when you actually maybe I don't have all the information that maybe the governor has access to, but I will tell you what, the most important thing you can do at this time of crisis is sharing information that you do have. Let's share it, because there's a lot more articles coming out now about the economic damage that is being done by a complete shutdown. And so we want to understand whether or not it's really, I don't want to say worth it, but whether it's necessary. Is it completely necessary to do this? Because at any time, if you have a child, if you have a grandparent, if you yourself are going through some sort of medical thing, or you have an immunodeficiency, you're always careful. It doesn't matter if there's a virus out there or not. You are always careful because you don't know. And so I think that is kind of where we should be, quite frankly, in my opinion. And if that's completely wrong, share with us the numbers. Really, share with us all of the numbers. Share with us the capacity and how full they are in terms of your hospitals. share with us that, so that we aren't panicked, so that we do understand more. We can take it. We're big people. I think that's what they should be doing more of, quite frankly.
Have you heard anything from the Republican Party as to the Republican convention that would be coming up in the summer? As to is anyone saying anything about whether that's going to be postponed or what?
I've not heard a word about that. I don't think the country's focused on any of that at this point. The only thing that I've heard that, in April, you've got some county conventions that are having to come up where you technically, legally have to be electing certain people to particular offices. So I imagine that we're going to have to get a variance on that, legislatively speaking. So I imagine they'll fix that. But I've not heard anything about the national convention. Nobody is talking about that. Nobody cares at this point.
Yeah, I know, going back to the oddity of campaigning in this environment. I know you had some Facebook videos where you kind of took questions online, and that's a nice approach, I suppose, a way to keep your voice out there and touch base with constituents. Have you found that to be effective? Do you plan to do more of those?
We've been doing regularly what we call Friday Night Lights. So it's a Facebook Live on a Friday night. Now, I did not do one this last Friday night, but for the most part, we're doing these every Friday night. I think we're going to ramp up and do more of those, and maybe even bring in it as a specific topic. But in general, there's, they tend to get anywhere from 1,500 to 4,000 views, depending on the topic and the interest. And then people can type in comments. In the comment section, they can type in questions directly to me about any topic, and my assistant will tee them up to me. We read them. So it's a great way to interact. I think I like them. Kind of you're on the hot seat the whole time, though, because nothing's scripted or recorded. But that's live.
Well, it's obviously all of us are trying to make this up as we go along, how we keep our businesses going, how do we continue to do what we need to do. And I know you set up an office there with your lighting appropriate, and we apologize again for the viewers that sometimes the connection with everyone on the internet, it gets a little bogged down. You look pretty clear right now, and it looks like a good set. We appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. Good luck on the campaign. Hopefully all of us can get out of the house and get out and join the campaign and hear the candidates talk, and hopefully you and I can do an interview back as we did last summer, face-to-face at an event. In the meantime, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
Well, thank you for having me on again, Terry. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeannie.